This day in sports history. It's March 13th, and on this day in 2012, it was the greatest comeback in an NCAA tournament game. So this is a pair of 14 seeds, BYU and Iona, playing in the first 4 round. Iona was a team that liked to get up and down the floor, high-octane offense, quick shots, rebound and miss, and get moving on a fast break with numbers. But not only were the Gales in constant motion, they were connecting on their shots. They hit 59% of their shot attempts in the first half, and by the 6-minute mark in the first, they were up by 25 points. But as hot as they had been, they cooled off considerably in the latter stages of the first half, and after scoring their 55th point, they went the final 4.5 minutes without scoring another one, and that allowed the Cougars to shave a 25-point lead down to 15 points at the break, and that made things a lot more manageable. When the second half started, the Gales had not snapped their cold streak, but BYU was getting red hot.
25-point lead at one point in the first half. Threatened to blow him out of the building, and this could cut it to 7. And it does. Silstra.
The Cougars used a 19-2 run to get within 1. Noah Hartsock was the guy who led the way in the comeback. After scoring just 6 in the first 20, he poured in 17 in the second.
They're not going to let Hartsock beat him on this possession.
2 to tie, 3 to take the lead. Houston, Hartsock, this for the lead, and BYU has come all the way back from 25 down to now lead it. An amazing comeback.
BYU closed out the game 78-72 to advance to the round of 64, where they played Marquette and got drilled by 20 to end their year. But at least on this night, they etched their name in the record book with officially the largest comeback in NCAA tournament history. Hey, real quick, you've heard me talk a lot about the Sterling Soap Company over the past few months, and if you haven't tried out their soaps, I get it. It's not easy changing up your routine. But let me just say, if you give them a try, I'm nearly 100% certain you will have zero regrets. They carry not only bar soap, but shave soap, liquid body soap, body lotions, beard balm, lip balm, and a lot more. Plus, there are myriad scents to choose from. Their products are made with natural ingredients and scented oils, and they are committed to being environmentally conscious. And I always get a handwritten note on my packing slip, so I know it's been checked before shipping, and it's a nice little human touch in a world that seems to be going away from that. Give Sterling Soap a try today at sterlingsoap.com. Let's go back to 1992 and what happened on this day in the SEC Tournament. It was a quarterfinal matchup between LSU and Tennessee. The Volunteers were the 6th seed and played the night before. LSU was the 3 seed and led by their junior big man Shaquille O'Neal. The Tigers jumped out early and built up a 22-point lead. The Vols were getting a little frustrated watching Shaq dunk on them constantly, and so with a little more than 10 minutes to play in this game, this happened.
LSU won 4 in a row, lost that heartbreaking game to Arkansas. Look out. Groves and O'Neal square off, and Dale Brown is pushing Groves. Dale Brown took a shot at Groves, and now Andre Patillo, the referee, Wade Houston is being grabbed as he went after Dale Brown, and the fights are all around. Williamson and Houston are squared off. Benches have cleared. They're right in front of the scorer's table. If you're ejected for fighting, you're suspended for the next game. O'Neal could be out tomorrow. That's exactly right. And we've got to wait to see what the referees are going to do here.
So the melee started with Carlos Groves grabbing Shaq around the waist in a blatant intentional foul, and Shaq swung his left arm around to get Groves off of him. It took about 15 minutes to get it all sorted out, but when they did, O'Neal and Groves were both ejected, along with 4 additional players from each team. Interestingly, though, Tigers coach Dale Brown was not ejected, even though he rushed on the floor and pushed Groves after the initial scuffle. LSU went on to win by 10 and advanced to the semifinals of the SEC Tournament, but they had to play without Shaq in that game. LSU lost to the Wildcats the next night, and Kentucky coasted to the SEC title with a win against Alabama. Now, it's always fun to play the what-if game, right? So how about this? What if the fight does not happen? Shaq doesn't get ejected, and he plays the next night against Kentucky. In their only meeting that year in the regular season, LSU beat Kentucky by 21, and Shaq had a 20-20 game. Now, that's not an automatic that they would beat them again in the conference tournament, but go with me here. LSU beats Kentucky and then goes on to win the conference tournament. The Wildcats may not be a 2 seed in the NCAA tournament, or maybe a 2 in another bracket. In that case, Kentucky doesn't meet Duke in the Elite 8 game, the Leitner Stomp doesn't happen, and the greatest college basketball game never happens. A lot of what-ifs in that scenario, but how cool to think that it's remotely possible that the Brawl on this day helped set up the Duke-Kentucky game that gave us the dramatic ending 2 weeks later. We're still about a week away from the NCAA Tournament getting underway, but today let's take a look back at one of those great first-round upsets in tournament history. On this day in 1998, it was the Valparaiso Crusaders making their third straight appearance in the NCAA Tournament as representatives of the Mid-Continent Conference. Their previous 2 visits had ended in first-round losses, and as the 13 seed against the number 4 seed and 13th ranked Ole Miss Rebels, well, that was what was expected in this game as well. But drawing a bit on their experience of their past 2 trips to the Big Dance, the Crusaders hung around and kept the game close throughout. Ole Miss was up only 4 at the half, and the game was in doubt through the second half as well. With 15 seconds to play in the game, Valpo was down 2 and rebounded a missed Rebel shot.
Doesn't get it. And the rebound to Valparaiso. And the Crusaders will have a last shot. Bryce Drew bringing it up. Drew for 3. No! Cisse for Ole Miss, and he's fouled. Oh. Bryce Drew, the coach's son, who's had a magnificent game for Valparaiso, had the shot, and it would have been for the lead.
With 4.1 seconds on the clock and Cisse a 74% free throw shooter along with being the SEC Player of the Year, Valpo figured they had just missed their opportunity to shake up the world with a first-round upset. Drew dropped his head and grabbed his shorts. The Ole Miss bench showed relief that they would be moving on with a couple of free throws from Cisse, and with the Rebels in the double bonus, one was certain, if not both. But Cisse missed the first, and Crusaders coach Homer Drew called his last timeout to set up a final play. Out of the timeout, the left-handed Cisse clanked the second free throw off the back iron, and the ball was tipped out of bounds by Ole Miss. Now with 2.5 seconds on the clock, Valpo had to go the length of the court.
The inbounds pass to be thrown by Jamie Sykes. Carter pressuring. It's to Jenkins, the Drew for the win! Gone! He did it! Bryce Drew did it! Valpo has won the game! A miracle!
The final play was called Pacer, and it was actually one that they had worked on in practice that season many times. But Homer said years later that it had never worked so well as it did on this day in 1998. Of course, the Cinderella slipper still fit. Valpo went on to beat the 12th-seeded Florida State Seminoles in the second round to advance to the Sweet 16 before their Cinderella story ended with a loss to Rhode Island. Of course, the greatest Cinderella of all time in college basketball was the 1983 NC State Wolfpack. On this day, it was the ACC Tournament final between the Pack and the Virginia Cavaliers. It had been an impressive run so far for the Pack as the 4 seed. They'd beaten Wake Forest by a point in the first round and followed that up with an overtime win against the top-seeded and defending national champion North Carolina Tar Heels, who also happened to be number 5 in the country at that point, in the semifinals. The Cavaliers were the 2 seed, and they had made mincemeat out of their 2 opponents so far, beating Duke in the opening round by 43, and then a 29-point beatdown of Georgia Tech in the semis to advance. Maybe they'd shot themselves out. Maybe they thought that with 7'4" senior center Ralph Sampson that they'd finally gotten to that point where they were just going to roll over everybody. And with State knocking out the Heels in the semis, the path was cleared for their coronation. Or maybe they thought that however things went early, they could always come back to win. In their meeting back in January, State had Virginia on the ropes in that one, up 18 at one point. But Derek Whittenburg had broken his foot in that one, and the Cavaliers came back to win. Whittenburg was back to near full health by this point, and he was making sure that the lead they built was not going to be overcome.
73-66, 7 seconds on the shot clock. Whittenburg puts it up and drops it in.
Oh, when they start to fall like that, Jim, you start to think Cinderella, upset city.
Time called.
One of the things that aided State's ability to hang on to the lead, and I had forgotten about this, but while they were experimenting with a 30-second shot clock in '83, it turned off in the final 4 minutes of the game. So with a 7-point lead with under 4 to play, the Pack went into their version of the four corners and held on to the ball. And if you look at the old footage, they had zero interest in challenging Sampson in the middle and actually taking a shot. So the Cavs had to resort to fouling. They got a huge break when they sent Terry Gannon to the line for a 1-and-1, and the 90% free throw shooter missed the front end. But the rebound was corralled by State, and they were able to salt away even more time. The Pack had several opportunities to put this game out of reach on the free throw line, but they continued to miss crucial freebies, and that gave Virginia a chance to claw their way back in.
They've got less than a minute to go now. And Wilson from outside gets a three-pointer. Hold your horses. It's not over yet. 78-75, 54 seconds to go. A three-pointer would tie it up.
The ACC was also one of the leagues experimenting with the three-point line this season, and from varying distances. During the tournament, the three-point arc was only 17 feet 9 inches. Othell Wilson's three he hit at that point was just inside the NBA three-point arc, so a legit three even by today's measurements. A few seconds later, Virginia had a chance to tie it with a three or make it a one-point game by going inside to their big man, Ralph Sampson. But the sneaky hands of Terry Gannon disrupted that and saved the day.
They can get the lob to Sampson. He's definitely open for the lob.
Sampson taken away from him by Gannon, taken right out of his hands. And now Bailey is fouled by Miller and will go to the line.
And yet, the Cavs still had a chance to tie it with a three to send it into overtime. They had 6 seconds and had to go the length of the court, but there was no sense of urgency from anybody, and they wasted their chance and didn't even get a shot off in time. State won the ACC title 81-78, and by most indications, that was the only way that they were going to make the NCAA Tournament. And with the 3-time National Player of the Year on the roster for 4 seasons, Virginia was never able to win the ACC title. But this would not be the last time that these two teams met that season. There was still more to come 13 days later. Hey, I needed to call a quick timeout to let you know that we're giving away a $50 gift card to Home Field Apparel. Have a favorite college sports team? Of course you do. You're listening to a sports podcast. Well, Home Field Apparel has all the great gear so you can support your team in style. Jerseys, hoodies, hats, and a whole lot more are available in your team's colors and insignias. So go to sportshistorynetwork.com/giveaways for your chance at a $50 gift card to Home Field Apparel. I've also put a link in the show notes. Now, let's get back out there. We've got more of this episode to do. On this day in 2011, Minnesota Timberwolf Kevin Love scored just 6 points in a loss to Golden State. That's notable because despite grabbing 12 rebounds, it broke his string of double-doubles at 53, which is still the NBA record. And in 1954, the Milwaukee Braves' Bobby Thomson broke his ankle in 3 places in a spring training game. Unfortunate and painful for him, but it opened up a spot for a young Henry Aaron to play left field for the Braves that season. And finally, here's today's non-sports Did You Know? If you and your friends are looking for a world record to break, how about the one for longest conga line? The longest conga line ever recorded is 119,986 people long.
What you talking about, Willis?
And it formed during a Cuban street festival on this day in 1988 in Miami. This has been an original Thrive Suite production.